The morning air in Ouagadougou was heavy, not with heat, but with tension. President Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his study, long before dawn. The window was opened slightly, letting in the scent of dust and mango leaves. The city was quiet, too quiet for a capital that had grown used to sirens and speeches. But something in the silence disturbed him more than noise ever could. His eyes were fixed on a single line in the classified military report that had arrived overnight. Abidjan radio frequencies temporarily blacked out. Presidential convoy seen rerouted. Situation unclear. Recommend observation. Traoré read the line again. Then again. Across the room, his chief of national security, Captain Nuhum Dembele, waited tensely. The president had not spoken since the report was delivered. Finally, Traoré leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "So it has begun," he murmured. "Sir," Nuhum said cautiously, "these are still rumors. We have not received any direct confirmation from the Ivorian military. The embassy in Abidjan is quiet." "Quiet?" Traoré repeated softly, looking up with piercing eyes. "That's the most dangerous sound of all." He stood up slowly, wearing his usual dark cotton tunic, the kind his people could afford, the kind that made his advisers uneasy in diplomatic halls. He walked to the cabinet and poured himself a glass of water. The silence between the two men stretched. "Sir, may I suggest that we prepare a formal ECOWAS statement? One that urges calm and neutrality?" Nuhum offered. Traoré turned, his voice sharper now. "Neutrality? When Africa is coughing blood again?" Nuhum said nothing. The room was dimly lit. On the wall hung a photo of Thomas Sankara. On another, the map of Africa, unlabeled, uncut by colonial borders. Traoré's voice grew quieter, but firmer. "The coup may still be hidden in the fog. But the fog is not new, Captain. We've seen this dance before. When leaders build fences around their failure, the people will always look for the gate." There was a soft knock. His secretary entered. "Mr. President," she said nervously, "Reuters has picked up the rumor. CNN too. Unrest in Abidjan. It's trending." "Let them trend," Traoré said, turning back to the window. "But when I speak, I will not speak in hashtags." The silence was broken again by the vibrating of a secure line. Nuhum answered. He spoke briefly in French, then turned to the president. "Sir. An Ivorian journalist just called our media liaison. Her name is Afua Diomande. She says soldiers are now posted outside RTI headquarters. Abidjan's national TV is playing only music and a flag screen. No president. No address." Traoré's expression didn't change. But something settled in his chest. He walked over to his desk, pulled out a leather folder, and slid aside the ECOWAS draft statement his foreign ministry had written the night before. It began. "We urge all parties in the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire to seek peaceful resolution and engage in constructive dialogue." He laughed bitterly. "This is not a boardroom quarrel. It is a people's fate," he said, pushing the paper aside. He picked up a pen instead. "No press release," he told his aide. "Then what shall we prepare, sir?" Traoré looked up, a fire behind his usually calm eyes. "Prepare the cameras," he said. "I will speak, not as a president behind curtains, but as a son of this continent." The presidential jet landed softly in Abuja under a gray sky. The ECOWAS Emergency Summit was called on short notice, but every seat in the council chamber was filled. Presidents, foreign ministers, military envoys, and economic advisers filed into the gold-rimmed hall, each one with a carefully polished speech and a stiff smile. Burkina Faso's delegation entered quietly. President Ibrahim Traoré wore no medals, no suit, no silk tie. Just his earth-toned Faso dan Fani tunic, and the gravity of a man who had chosen truth over applause. The Ivorian seat beside him was empty. A bell rang. The meeting began. "Let us remain calm," said the ECOWAS chair, a well-fed president from a coastal state who had ruled for 15 years. "Let us avoid inflammatory language. The reports are not yet fully confirmed." He looked directly at Traoré as he spoke those last words, but Traoré didn't flinch. The next hour passed in the usual rhythm of African diplomacy: cautious phrasing, colonial syntax, rehearsed concern. Most of the speakers called for sanctions. Some proposed suspension of Ivory Coast from the Union. A few murmured the word intervention. When it was Traoré's turn, he didn't stand immediately. He allowed the silence to stretch. Only when every eye turned toward him did he rise, slowly, with the stillness of a man preparing to wound not with force, but with words. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, voice steady, "I did not come here to say what is safe. I came to say what is necessary." Some shifted in their seats. Others folded their arms. "I have heard the calls for discipline, punishment, protocol. But I ask you, before we punish the gunman, have we questioned what made the gun necessary?" He let the words land. Was it a hunger for power, or a hunger in the people's stomachs? Was it a breach of democracy, or the final cry of a nation that had been gagged for too long? One delegate interrupted. "President Traoré, with respect, we must not romanticize coups. We are here to defend stability." Traoré turned to him, unbothered. "Yes. But stability for who, Your Excellency? For the elite? For the men behind tinted glass? Or for the market woman who hasn't seen affordable tomatoes in 3 months?" The room grew tense. "Let us not pretend," he continued. "Many of us sit in this chamber wearing suits tailored in Europe, reading speeches typed by consultants, while our people sleep hungry. Is it truly a shock that soldiers, who come from the same soil, sometimes rise in fury?" A few murmurs of disapproval. But more than that, a quiet, undeniable respect. Even those who disagreed could not ignore the fire behind his words. Traoré pressed on. "I do not celebrate coups. I lived through one. I lost friends to one. But I will not play blind when the conditions that give birth to them are left to fester while we pretend all is well." He paused. "And let me speak now not as a president, but as a soldier. When I wore the uniform, I did not wear it to become king. I wore it to protect mothers in tin-roof homes. I wore it to stop bullets, not to inherit palaces." His voice deepened, his Burkinababe accent rising like a drumbeat under each word. "So if the men in boots in Abidjan claim they have taken power for the people, then I challenge them to prove it. Not with slogans. Not with parades. But with clean water. With functioning clinics. With justice in the streets and food in the markets." He placed both hands on the table. "And if they will not, then let them step down now, because a coup without justice is a lie in uniform." The room was silent. Traoré scanned the faces of his fellow leaders, some ashamed, some angry, some quietly awakened. He spoke one last time. "I propose no sanction. I propose no war. I propose a mirror. Let Ivory Coast look into it, and let every one of us do the same. If we are leaders, then let us lead from truth. If we are not, then let us make way. With that, he sat down. No claps. No applause. Only silence. The kind that means something real had just been said. The summit was over. Back in his quarters in Abuja, Ibrahim Traoré stood by the window, arms folded behind his back. He wasn't thinking of the press. Or the Twitter clips. Or the diplomatic ripples his speech had created. He was thinking of a different uniform. A different day. A different version of himself. It was in 2015. Northern Burkina Faso. A tense, dry morning in the town of Arbinda. The government had just imposed fuel tax hikes. Food prices had doubled. Electricity cuts were rampant. A protest had started outside the governor's compound, nothing violent. Just women in wrappers beating empty pots. Young men holding cardboard signs. A few elderly men leaning on walking sticks, shouting slogans about dignity. The government panicked. Orders came from above: disperse the crowd. Immediately. With force if necessary. 22-year-old Second Lieutenant Ibrahim Traoré stood with his unit of soldiers at the edge of the square. He had his rifle slung across his chest. Helmet on. Finger near the trigger. In front of him, a young girl, maybe 16, stood with tears in her eyes and a chalkboard slate tied to her neck. On it, she had written, "We are not beggars. We are citizens." Their eyes met. That moment burned itself into his memory. He remembered how her hands shook, but her eyes didn't flinch. He remembered how one of his commanders shouted, "Give the warning shot," and how his fellow soldiers raised their guns. He remembered tightening his grip. And then, he remembered stopping. He had lowered his rifle, slowly, and stepped forward, placing himself between the crowd and his comrades. "Stand down," he had said, voice calm but steady. His superior had barked at him. "You're disobeying a direct order." But Traoré didn't move. "We're not at war," he said. "We're standing in front of women and children with hunger in their eyes. We are the ones with power. We must not become the threat." The moment could have ended his career. It nearly did. He was reassigned. Sent to remote border duty. Passed over for a promotion. Mocked as the peace soldier by his peers. But that girl's eyes, he never forgot them. Back in the present, Traoré sat down on the edge of the hotel bed and reached into his travel bag. Inside was a small photo he always carried. A folded, creased print of that day in Arbinda, taken by a foreign journalist. In the image, Traoré stood with arms outstretched, palms facing his unit, shielding the crowd behind him. He looked at the girl's face in the photo. He never knew her name. But in every speech he gave, she was there. In every reform he signed, she stood behind him. She was the symbol of why he rose. He whispered to himself. "I once held a gun. But I didn't point it at my people. That's why I can speak today. That's why they must listen." The past hadn't made him soft. It made him dangerous, to liars in epaulets and thieves in high places. He stood up, folded the photo carefully, and slipped it back into his pocket. Tomorrow, he would speak again, not to presidents in suits, but to the people. The continent. The truth was no longer a whisper. It was a call. And he would carry it like a rifle of words. The studio was quiet. No flashing lights. No cheering audience. No choreographed introduction. Just a single wooden chair in the center of the frame, a weathered national flag of Burkina Faso behind it, and a camera crew under strict orders, no edits. No filters. No teleprompter. President Ibrahim Traoré sat calmly. He wore a simple navy blue tunic and old sandals from the market in Tenkadogo. No medals. No military stars. Just the face of a man who had seen war, and chose words instead of bullets. His communications director stood beside the cameraman, lips tight. "Are you ready, Mr. President?" Traore looked into the camera. "I was born ready for this," he replied. The red light blinked on. And he began. "To the soldiers of Côte d'Ivoire. I speak to you not from a golden office, but from the dust. I do not speak as a superior. I speak as a brother. Because before I was called president, I was called soldier. Before I signed papers, I signed silence with my boots in the mud. And so I understand the burden you now carry. The gun may feel light in your hand today. But tomorrow, it will weigh like history on your back. You have taken power. But have you taken responsibility? You wear uniforms. But are you wearing dignity? You stand on podiums. But can you stand before your people, not guarded by rifles, but guided by truth? Let me say this clearly. Liberation is not declared with boots. It is proven in hospitals, schools, and in the stomachs of the people. If your revolution cannot fix leaking roofs in the maternity wards, if it cannot bring down the price of cassava, if it cannot build peace in the heart of a grieving widow, then, brothers, you have not led a revolution. You have simply changed the locks on the same door of suffering. He paused. The silence was loud. Then he continued, slower, deeper. I do not come to condemn you. I come to challenge you. Because I have lived that uniform. I know what it feels like to follow broken orders from broken men. I know what it is to be praised for silence and punished for conscience. But I also know this. If you truly took power for the people, then you must now live among them. Not behind gates. Not behind sunglasses. But in the markets, in the traffic, in the clinics, and in the chaos. Ask the grandmother selling plantain if your rule has fed her. Ask the boy who lost his father in Boak if your boots brought him safety. Ask the teacher who hasn't been paid in 3 months if this new flag means a new dawn. He leaned forward now, voice quieter but sharper. Because a coup without justice is a lie in uniform. And power without purpose is just polished oppression. So I offer you this. Let us meet. Not in a backroom. Not through envoys. Not through filtered statements. Let us meet, man to man, soldier to soldier. On live television, in front of our people. Let us ask the question, for the people, or for power? If your hearts are clean, you will come. If your minds are clear, you will speak. If your motives are pure, you will not fear a debate before the children of Africa. He stood up, softly but firmly. Looked directly into the lens. Ibrahim Traoré is waiting. But more importantly, Africa is watching. And with that, the screen faded to black. Within minutes, the speech was everywhere. Hashtag for the people or for power. Hashtag Traore Speakstrith. Hashtag no more lies in uniform. From Lagos to Kigali, from Libreville to Bamako, phones buzzed, radios repeated, and televisions re-aired the clip. In Abidjan, the military council held a silent emergency meeting. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré folded his tunic and went home to eat millet porridge with his niece. The storm had been called out. And now, Africa waited to see who would answer. By midnight, the continent was on fire. Not with bullets. But with words. From Nairobi's tea stalls to Lagos traffic jams, in the nightclubs of Accra and the roadside bars of Abidjan, President Ibrahim Traoré's speech was being replayed on loop. People huddled over radios, headphones, TV screens. Even old women who hadn't followed politics in years stopped cooking to listen. Liberation is not declared with boots. That line echoed like thunder across WhatsApp groups and roadside debates. In Côte d'Ivoire, the military council was scrambling. General Soro Dosso, the so-called transition leader, watched the broadcast 3 times in one night. His advisors were tense. Some urged him to ignore it. Others called for a firm rebuttal. But the general stayed silent. He did not attack us, he finally said. He challenged us. There is a difference. One aide replied nervously, "Sir, the people are sharing the clip. It's trending everywhere. Even soldiers are watching." Dosso said nothing. He looked out the window at the darkened city. Abidjan was quiet, but the kind of quiet that came before rain or rebellion. In Nigeria, a youth activist group reposted the full video with subtitles in Pidgin and Hausa. It hit 1.2 million views overnight. A young woman named Amaka tweeted, "Traore is saying what our own leaders fear to whisper. This man carries fire in his throat." Radio hosts in Ibadan and Port Harcourt began inviting callers. Should our soldiers hear this speech? Should our leaders? One caller simply said, "That man's voice is Sankara reincarnated." In Ghana, students from the University of Legon staged a flash mob with signs that read, "We want power with purpose. Guns do not feed us. Traore, we hear you." The government remained tight-lipped, but quietly, the president summoned his Security Council. "Find out how we make sure our military is listening to us, not to their own ambitions." In the Sahel, where villages often felt forgotten, a griot in Djibo sang the entire speech in Mandinka rhythm with a talking drum behind him. Elders nodded. Young boys who couldn't read still sat around him, listening as though the future had come in the form of music. And in the slums of Abidjan, something sparked. The next day, hundreds of youth gathered at Place de la République. They wore no political colors. No party banners. Just shirts scribbled with handmade quotes from the speech. "We are not afraid of guns anymore. We are afraid of being silent. Power is not in boots, it is in feeding our mothers." A girl stood atop a concrete barrier with a loudspeaker. "General Dosso, come to the forum. Come to the stage. Let Africa hear your heart." The soldiers on guard watched nervously. But they didn't open fire. Not this time. The African Union? They stayed quiet. Too quiet. But their inboxes flooded with petitions, open letters, and social media pressure to respond. The European diplomats? Panicked. Private memos circulated. Burkina Faso's president is becoming too influential. His narrative is fueling anti-establishment momentum. We may need to reconsider aid packages or media partnerships. But they were already late. The message had left the gates. And now, Africa was talking to itself again. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré sat in his modest office as night gave way to dawn. His staff brought him a list of media appearances, interviews, analysis reports. He brushed them aside. "Let them talk," he said. "What matters now is what happens in Abidjan." His advisor nodded. "Sir, word is, General Dosso is considering accepting your challenge." The televised forum. Traoré didn't smile. But his eyes narrowed with quiet fire. "Then we will see," he said, "if he came for power, or for the people." 3 days had passed. Abidjan was holding its breath. No president. No swearing in. Just uniforms and announcements. The military council had taken control, but not the heart of the people. That still belonged to something else now, a voice, transmitted from a simple wooden chair in Ouagadougou. That voice had called. And now, the nation waited to see who would answer. At exactly 8 a.m. on a Thursday, the interim spokesperson for the military, Colonel Jean-Marc Cohn, stood at the national broadcaster RTI. He wore his pressed camouflage uniform, but not the usual cold posture of a coup announcer. His voice was measured. Almost uncertain. To the people of Côte d'Ivoire, to our brothers and sisters across West Africa. The military council has heard the challenge issued by President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. He cleared his throat. We recognize his call was not one of insult, but of accountability. And though we may not agree with every word, we agree with one truth. Africa is watching. Therefore, in the spirit of transparency and regional brotherhood, we accept the invitation to a public forum. To speak openly before the people, and before the continent. The camera zoomed slightly as he closed with a final line. We have taken power. Now, we must speak about what we intend to do with it. The room behind him was silent. But the streets outside lit up like wildfire. Hashtag Forum for Africa. Hashtag for the people or for power. Hashtag traore. In Ouagadougou, the news reached the presidency within minutes. President Traoré was in his courtyard, planting cassava with his niece when his aide ran in breathless. Mr. President, they accepted. Traoré rose slowly. Brushed dirt from his hands. He didn't look surprised. Then we must prepare a stage, not for performance, but for truth. Traoré made one thing clear. No palace. No podium. No closed doors. He rejected the offers to host the debate in the ECOWAS chamber, a government hall, or a hotel ballroom. Take me to the place where the people already gather. A place that echoes with real voices. The choice, the Independence Square in Ouagadougou. A massive open-air space in the heart of the city. No VIP section. No velvet ropes. Just a stage, 2 chairs, 2 microphones. And the continent watching. Preparation was swift, but symbolic. The backdrop, not flags of states, but portraits of unsung African heroes, teachers, nurses, market women, miners. The audience, made up of 60% youth, hand-picked from universities, community groups, rural towns. The moderator, a respected Senegalese journalist known for her no-nonsense style, Awa Diagne. The invitation, extended live to every media house in Africa and the diaspora. In the days leading up to the forum, radio callers in Kumasi, Kinshasa, and Kigali left voice notes. We've never seen this before, 2 men with guns settling it with truth. This is Africa's turning point. I'm watching with my grandmother and my son. All generations. One moment. Even BBC and Al Jazeera requested access. But Traoré gave exclusive streaming rights to African independent media only. Let this story be told in our voice. Let it be captured by those who understand the weight of our soil. The night before the forum, Traoré didn't rehearse. He sat with elders from his village, listening to stories, eating roasted peanuts, letting the ground remind him who he was. One of the elders leaned close and whispered. When the lion roars, it is not to start a war, but to remind the forest who leads. And at dawn, the final preparations began. 2 chairs. 1 continent. No script. Just a single question in bold red letters across the front of the stage. For the people. Or for power? The sky over Ouagadougou was the color of firewood ash, calm, but expectant. By 8 a.m., the Independence Square was already overflowing. They came in buses, on foot, on okadas and donkey carts. Old men with walking sticks. Mothers with babies tied to their backs. University students waving notebooks in the air like revolutionary banners. There were no cheerleaders. No party colors. Just one phrase stamped on homemade placards, printed on shirts, and written on people's hearts. For the people or for power? The stage was simple. 2 wooden chairs. A single table between them. No screens. No bulletproof glass. No military presence. Just truth. On one side sat Colonel Jean-Marc Cohn, the reluctant face of Ivory Coast's military transition. Crisp uniform. Heavy face. Gloves off, but tension visible in his jaw. On the other side sat President Ibrahim Traoré, dressed in a faded cotton tunic, sleeves rolled, face bare, eyes steady. He had no folder. No notes. No briefcase. Only memory. And conviction. At 9 a.m. sharp, Awa Diagne, the moderator, took the microphone. Today, we do something different. We do not war with bullets. We battle with vision. Today is not for show. It is for answers. For clarity. For Africa. This forum has one question: did you take power for the people, or for yourself? She turned to Colonel Cohn. You may begin. The colonel cleared his throat. Our country was in chaos. Our civilian government failed to protect national interests. Foreign influence was drowning us. We had to act. We did not seek power. Power was forced upon us by failure. Murmurs in the crowd. We are stabilizing the nation. We plan to return to democracy. Awa nodded. By when? The colonel hesitated. When conditions permit. Someone in the crowd shouted. They always say that. Awa turned to Traoré. Mr. President? Traoré leaned forward. His voice was calm. But every syllable struck like rain on dry metal. Brother Cohn, I do not doubt your frustration. I doubt your plan. You say power was forced on you. But the people have not seen you resist it. Laughter and applause rippled through the square. You speak of foreign interference, but the rice is still expensive, and the medicines are still missing. Your boots have marched. But has the water returned to the taps? Has the teacher been paid? Has the orphan slept better? The colonel straightened, defensive. Change takes time. Traoré did not blink. Time? The people gave the last government time. Now you ask for their patience again, yet give them no proof that this road leads anywhere new. He stood. Now the air thickened. Let me be plain. I wore a uniform too. I know the smell of sweat in helmets. I know loyalty and discipline. But let me ask you something, man to man, would you give your own mother a seat in this system you've built? The crowd fell utterly silent. Traoré turned to them. My people, let me ask you directly. Since the takeover, has the cost of bread gone down? No, the crowd roared. Has the health clinic reopened? No. Has justice returned for the widow? For the farmer? For the student? No. He faced Cohn again. Then how dare we call this a transition? This is not a bridge, it is a barricade. And no matter how much gold you pour on a gun, it cannot build a school. Colonel Cohn was visibly rattled. He looked out into the sea of faces, so many eyes. Not of hatred, but of disappointment. We are trying, he stammered. We have not finished our roadmap. Traoré walked to the center of the stage. Then write the map with them. Not behind closed doors. Let the people decide their future. Let the soldier return to his barracks. Let the power return to the people. Thunderous applause exploded. Students jumped. Women clapped. Elders nodded slowly, tears on their cheeks. We do not want a savior in boots. We want servants in plain cloth. We want truth, not titles. That night, the forum was broadcast across Africa. For the first time in history, a sitting president and a military leader debated their legitimacy publicly, not with slogans, but with stories, questions, and accountability. Within weeks, the Ivorian military announced a civilian-led transitional council. Regional governments began dialogues on internal military reform. ECOWAS proposed a new charter for youth participation in state-building. And Traoré? He returned to his quiet desk in Ouagadougou. He wrote one sentence in his journal. This is the Africa we were meant to be.